Welcome to the Next Level Human podcast. As a human, you have a job to do. In fact, you have 4 jobs: to earn and manage money, to attain and maintain health and fitness, to build and sustain personal relationships, to find meaning and make a difference. None of these jobs are taught in school, and that is what this podcast is designed to do: to educate us all on living our most fulfilled lives through the mastery of these 4 jobs. I'm your host, Dr. Jade, Teta, and I believe we are here living this life for 3 reasons, and 3 reasons only: to learn, to teach, and to love. In this podcast, I will be learning, teaching, and loving right along with you. I'm grateful to have your company. Here's to our next level. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to today's show. Today's show is going to be a show that is all about nutrition and the high-level aspects of nutrition when we think about things in terms of what the research is actually telling us. So let's face it, part of the reason I'm doing this particular podcast is because nutrition and eating for health and fitness and fat loss is extremely confusing for many people, because we're constantly inundated with information that says, oh, you should do this or you should do that. You know, we all know that there has been a constant moving target in terms of what we are supposed to do with our nutrition. You know, back in the 80s when I was coming up, it's like avoid fat. Then in the 90s, it was don't do carbohydrates at all. And then in the early 2000s, it moved to more towards a paleo type approach, then a primal approach, and then keto, which had made appearances throughout those times, came back. And then, of course, intermittent fasting has become popular. And then we have circadian fasting. And now we have diets like the carnivore diet and all of these kinds of things. And the idea is, what should we do? Now, if you're listening to this podcast, I already know that you are someone who tries to avoid dogmatic, biased viewpoints in general, but especially in nutrition. If you're listening to this podcast, you are probably acutely aware that it is important not to make nutrition something along the lines of politics or religion like many people do. Of course, when we think about politics and religion, we think about very biased, dogmatic, entrenched views that can't be changed, that are rigid, that are one size fits all, etc. This is the way people approach those topics. Well, nutrition now has become a topic that is very similar, very entrenched, very biased, very dogmatic. This one size fits all approach. Everyone needs to be doing this and that. The fact of the matter is, if you've listened to this podcast and understand metabolism from my point of view and my partner company at Metabolic and what we are doing, you understand that metabolism and nutrition is something that needs to be matched to our individual metabolism. We are all different. We are different in our physiology. We now know that if we all eat the same piece of white bread, some of us will get huge glucose excursions. Some of us won't at all. That white bread might cause some of us to have appetite suppression, others to have appetite elevation. Some of us might have cravings as a result of that piece of bread. Others may feel perfectly fine. Some people might have gluten sensitivities and break out in a rash. Some people might not have issues with gluten sensitivity. So we're each different physiologically. We are also different psychologically. We handle stress different. We have different personalities. We have different perceptions and perspectives on the world. And these belief systems help or hurt us. They can act as placebos, beneficial beliefs that subconsciously help our diet work for us, or nocebo effects, subconscious beliefs that unconsciously work against us and our choices. In other words, if we believe the world is a war zone, then we will find battles everywhere, whether they exist or not. If we believe that everything that we touch that is man-made nutrition will kill us and give us cancer, then we are promoting in our psychology a belief system that makes us a little bit more rigid. Some people respond to stress with decreased hunger and cravings. Other people respond to stress, most people do, with elevated hunger and cravings. And so not only are we different in our physiology and our psychology, we are different in our personal preferences. Some people like beer and broccoli and coffee and bitter foods. Other people like starches. Other people tend to have sweet tooths, etc. So we are each different in our personal preferences and what we like and do not like. And of course, we're each different in our practical circumstances. Some people have kids. Some people have resources where they can shop at Whole Foods every day. Some people live in food deserts where they don't have access to stuff. Some people have to eat relatively cheap food, or because they have a busy life and eat mainly out of fast food and things like that and don't have time to prepare meals, etc. Our practical circumstances, monetarily, environmentally, also make a difference. So we are different in our psychology, our physiology, our personal preferences, and our practical circumstances. And therefore, our nutritional choices need to be matched to this metabolic reality of what I call the 4 Ps: physiology, psychology, personal preferences, and practical circumstances. And so each of us need to be looking at food differently in this way. And so let me bring you through a model that I think is useful, several models actually, that I think is useful to keep these things in mind. Now, I'm going to do this in sort of a hierarchical structure, meaning that there is, based on the research in my mind, a different importance level for each of these aspects. So I would call this sort of the 5 T's, let's say, of nutritional organization. The first thing you want to be aware of is total amount of food, right? The amount of food you eat, no matter what type of food you're eating, is critically important. You absolutely can overeat healthy foods. In fact, some so-called healthy foods, avocados, nuts and seeds, things like this, are very high in calories. And while they may have beneficial aspects to them in terms of nutritional aspects, if they are overeating due to the total calorie load and the energy in that particular food, can still cause you to overeat. And if it does cause you to overeat, this is not something that is beneficial for your goals of looking good, feeling good, functioning better, and living longer. We know that we must operate in a Goldilocks zone. We need to eat enough to get the nutrition we need, but not so much to store fat. We also can't eat too little. So there's this Goldilocks zone here. So the most important aspect here, based on the research, when we're talking about looking good, feeling good, living longer, and functioning better, is total amount of food. Understanding that if we are eating the right amount of food, not too much, not too little, but just right, this Goldilocks effect, then we're not going to store too much fat, which is an inflammatory, health-robbing aspect regardless. If we are over fat, we cannot be healthy. And if we are overeating healthy foods that are making us over fat, those are no longer truly healthy foods. So total amount matters. This means that calories absolutely matter. This means that portion size absolutely matter. We must take into account the total amounts of foods that we eat. And if you're somebody who has only been paying attention to certain types of foods, like I eat healthy foods, or I avoid all carbs, or I eat this particular type of food, and have not ever paid attention to total amounts of food, you might be missing something, which is the reason why I'm going through this. So total amount of food matters. It's time to talk about one of our sponsors of today's episode, AG1 by Athletic Greens. Now, many of you have heard me say this before, but I am not a fan of vegetables, which I know is funny given I've been in the health and fitness industry for so long. I blame my mother and father for this. When I was a kid, what they would do was essentially take the broccoli, the Brussels sprouts, the spinach, the collard greens, and just steam them. No salt, no fat, no taste whatsoever, just these bitter greens. And so I developed a distaste for a lot of different vegetables, which has stayed with me into adulthood. one of the things I've done to mitigate that is use a greens powder pretty much ever since greens powders have come out on the market. And I've tried every single one. They started out tasting like swamp water. I found a few that I really like the taste, but recently, one that I have been taking for a very long time, as you all know, I wear a continuous glucose monitor. I found that it was actually spiking my blood sugar because probably the tapioca starch in it, which some people don't respond to tapioca starch with elevated blood sugars. I was. And so it sent me on a mission to find another one. And one of my friends turned me on to AG1 by Athletic Greens. Now, I've heard about Athletic Greens and AG1 for quite some time. I just never tried it. And now that I have tried it, I have become a huge fan, so much so that I partnered with Athletic Greens and AG1 to sponsor this podcast. Now, let me tell you what happened here. After I saw that my blood sugars were spiking, my friend gave me a couple samples of AG1. I began using those and testing the blood sugar and found there was no spike. The other thing I found is that AG1 is interested in its taste profile. It's very neutral. The one I was taking before was a little sweet. I really loved it. But this one is very neutral, which actually suits me because what I found is I can actually not only take this first thing in the morning in water and have it taste very neutral, almost like there's nothing there. I can also add it into my protein shakes, which means now I'm getting double the greens that I was getting previously because I add this right into my protein shakes and it does not change the flavor of the shake at all. The other thing I realized once I started looking at the label is that this product is not simply a greens product. It also is a multivitamin, multimineral. It also has fiber, which acts as a prebiotic. It has probiotics in it, and it has functional mushrooms, which act as adaptogens in it. That's 4 different products essentially in one. And I've been taking mushrooms for some time. I stopped taking them now because now I have this in my greens. I have also taken my multivitamin and make this my multivitamin. So I'm actually saving money, and this is going to save you money as well. The product AG1 is also NSF certified. And you're going to say, Jade, what does that mean? The National Sanitation Foundation is a foundation that essentially does testing on products to make sure there are no harmful substances, no persistent organic pollutants, no heavy metals. Now, this costs money to do. AG1 and Athletic Greens has spent the money on this. They spend money on making sure that the product that you are getting is good quality without contamination in it. You might say, well, Jade, isn't this true of all products? And actually, no, it is not. If you ever follow some of the news in this area through consumer labs and other things that do testing on these products, you'll see that many of them will have trace levels of things like mercury and cadmium and lead and things like that in them because they're not doing this testing. So this is an extra piece of insurance for us. The other thing I love about this product that I learned as I was doing my research on it is that this is the 52nd tweak or adjustment they have made to this product in their existence. AG1 has been tweaked 52 times. Now you might say, well, Jade, why would they be doing that? And the reason why is because they continue to improve. We know that science is evolving. We know that it's not just about more nutrients. It's about balanced nutrients. It's about the Goldilocks effect of this. And they are constantly learning, as we all are, and then constantly adjusting their product to taste better, to be more efficient and effective in delivering the nutrients. It acts as an antioxidant. It acts as a multivitamin. It's a prebiotic, a probiotic, and an adaptogen all in one. They have mastered this over several iterations of this particular product. And so I am a huge fan right now of AG1 and Athletic Greens. And I'm hoping that you will check this out. It's time for all of us to reclaim our health and arm our immune system with convenient daily nutrition. And AG1 does that with just 1 scoop in a cup of water every single day. That is all you need. There is now no longer a need for a million different pills and supplements to look after your health. All you need is this particular one. It really clears the stage to simplify your supplement regime, To make it easy for you, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/next level. That's athleticgreens.com/next level to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Check out AG1. I love it. I know you're going to love it. And I'm so happy that they are on board to sponsor the podcast as well. Thanks so much. Check out AG1, athleticgreens.com/next level. And let's get back to the show. Now, second, and a very close second, and perhaps for some people it acts more importantly than total, is type of food. This would be the idea of macronutrients, carbohydrates, sugars and starches, fats, the lipids that we consume, and protein. This matters too, the types of foods. Now, when we think about types of foods, we do know that while I always say researchers do work and studies are a tool for averages, not individuals, well, averages are most people. So most individuals will fall into some of these rules. And we do know that of these macronutrients, these types of foods, proteins tend to be the most satiating, hunger suppressing foods, as well as the most thermogenic foods. So as you elevate your protein, and research is very clear on this, if you substitute equal amounts of protein calories for fat or carbohydrate calories, most people, just in making that switch, not changing the total amount of food at all, just having more of the type of protein, what ends up happening is they end up eating less overall, simply because protein is satiating and more thermogenic, and they oftentimes end up losing weight. And so type and total kind of go hand in hand, but you can see how just focusing on certain types without being more specific, like healthy foods, quote, can get you into trouble. So we need to be looking at total amount of food, and we need to be looking at types of foods and understanding that our tolerance for each of these different types are different. In general, though, if we look at the totality of the research, many people, especially those who are heavy exercisers, are under eating protein, overeating combinations of sugar, starch, fat, sugar, and alcohol. That combination, by the way, that type of food combination causes us to be more hedonistic, to seek out more highly palatable, good tasting foods and eat more of those foods. Meanwhile, when we eat foods that are more protein-based and fiber-based and water-based, things like the famous S's that I oftentimes talk about: soups, salads, scrambles, shakes, and stir fries. And in particular, low carb, low fat soups, salads, scrambles, shakes, and stir fries. When we eat more protein, fiber, and water-rich foods, we tend to crave less, have less hunger, and automatically eat less in general. So yes, we need to take care of total amount of foods. We also need to look at types of foods. And the types of foods that we should be eating are foods that, in my mind, follow sort of this lean acronym. They tend to be low in calories. They have enough flavor, but not too much. They are appetite suppressing, and they are nutrient dense. So lean is a good acronym to remember when you're thinking about types of foods. Low calorie, tasty, enough taste, but not too much taste, appetite suppressing, and nutrient dense. And in general, these are going to be foods that are soups, salads, scrambles, shakes, stir fries, skillet meals, all of the S's that you've oftentimes heard me think about. And more specifically, soup, salad, scrambles, shakes, stir fries, skillet meals that are not too rich in the highly hedonistic combinations of fat, sugar, salt, alcohol, starch. Having enough, but not too much starch and fat and spices. That's where the E comes in this lean acronym. Enough taste, but not too much. So low calorie, enough taste, but not too much, appetite suppressing, nutrient dense. Think lean foods in that regard. These are the types of foods that you want to be consuming. Now we get into the next three areas here that are in a loose hierarchy, depending on where you're coming from. So there's actually the timing of food, and the timing of food is basically when you eat. This has an awful lot to do with the new science of circadian rhythms and things like that. We know that we are more insulin sensitive first thing in the morning after a fast. We know that we tend to be more insulin sensitive when we have equal time eating with equal time fasting. So the ideal situation for humans is to go 12 hours with food and 12 hours without food. This is oftentimes referred to as time restricted feeding. So we can think about timing of food as time restrictions of food, eating most of our bigger meals or most of our meals that are loaded with carbohydrates and things like that, perhaps earlier in the day versus later in the day, depending on our 4Ps, depending on our unique physiology, psychology, personal preferences, and practical circumstances. What I mean by that is that for some people, physiologically speaking, they need a little starch at night to generate some serotonin to help them sleep a little bit better. And so the idea here is to roll this sort of timing of food into this circadian aspect, understanding how it is for most of us on the average. Most of us want to be consuming our bigger meals and more starch-heavy meals in the beginning of the day and be consuming smaller meals and more less carbohydrate later in the day, which is the exact opposite of what most people do. And we want to look at this recommendation through the lens of our own physiology and psychology, realizing that if you're someone who has difficulty sleeping, eating closer to bed, maybe having a little bit more starch at night could be beneficial. This is frequently the case with women going through menopause and perimenopause. And so timing of food has a lot to do with this idea of time restriction. So we do want to be thinking about, am I having equal time away from food as I am eating food? And when am I consuming my meals? For most people, it may be more beneficial based on the research to have bigger meals and more starch-heavy meals first thing in the day or earlier in the day versus later in the day, depending on the person. Then we go timeline of eating. And from my perspective, this has a lot to do with frequency, right? My timeline of eating is, okay, if you're doing the traditional timeline, then it's breakfast around 8 o'clock, lunch around noon, right? Maybe a snack around 4 o'clock, and then dinner somewhere between 6 and 8 p.m. The idea here, though, is frequency of eating should be taken into account. Not all of us need 3 meals per day. Some of us can get by on 2 meals per day or even 1 meal a day. And when we go back up to the top and think about, okay, total amount of food, some people can consume less totals by paying attention to this timeline of eating and eating less frequently. Now, other people who are exercising a ton or who are always chasing their hunger around or have very volatile blood sugar levels and energy levels may need to be eating more often, smaller, frequent meals. But you understand the frequency of eating, in my mind, is less important than the total amount of food you're consuming and the type of food you are consuming, and perhaps when you tend to consume food versus not consume food. So if you are talking about timeline of eating, you want to also then say, what's the timing of that? For example, if you're following a 12 on, 12 off sort of fasting regime where you give yourself equal time with and without food, and you're going to consume a timeline of 3 meals frequency of eating, then that timeline would probably happen between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Or if you're going to eat 2 meals per day, right, you're probably going to consume those perhaps, let's say, between 8 a.m. and let's say 4 p.m. And so you're still getting the frequency, the timing of food inside of the timeline that you are eating. It's time for one of our sponsors, and this sponsor is a very exciting one and a new one, Timeline Nutrition and their supplement MitoPure. Now, if I was going to ask you what is the most important aspect of metabolism, the mitochondria would have to be tops on your list. The mitochondria are the little energy producing factories inside every single one of your cells. They take the end products of the food we eat, they break them down into cellular ATP and provide energy for the entire metabolism. And these mitochondria, if they are healthy and acting appropriately, can keep us looking good, feeling good, living longer and functioning better. However, when they are not at optimal function, when they are burning energy in a dirty fashion, when they are damaged, they actually speed cellular aging. They speed up the aging process. We end up suffering from things like fatigue. We end up having all manner of dysfunctions, including weight loss resistance and other issues around weight loss. The mitochondria are the most important elements for the metabolism to function optimally, lose weight, age appropriately, etc. In this compound, MitoPure, that Timeline Nutrition has developed, there is a product called urolithin A. Now, urolithin A is an interesting compound because it is a postbiotic. Now, what does that mean? A postbiotic is a compound that is made from the bacteria in the gut. And so when you eat things like pomegranates, strawberries, walnuts, things with polyphenols like this, they go into the digestive tract, your gut bacteria start working on them, and they can create compounds. Urolithin A is one compound that is in the MitoPure product. It naturally occurs in nature from this bacteria in our gut that break down the polyphenols from primarily foods like pomegranates, strawberries, etc. And it can increase mitophagy in mitochondria. So you might say, well, Jade, what is mitophagy? Mitophagy is the ability for mitochondria to repair and regenerate and recycle their proteins and to stay healthy and functional and de-age. When we can stimulate mitophagy, we can keep our mitochondria functioning efficiently. We can decrease aging. We can increase energy. We can improve our ability to lose weight, function optimally, and stave off diseases of aging. This is what Timeline Nutrition has done with their MitoPure product and the urolithin A that is in it. This is a very exciting area of research. We have not had the ability to support the mitochondria in the way that we do now with this particular product. You definitely are going to want to check this out. I've been taking the product for several months now. It is one of these products that I really, really strongly recommend. To get the product MitoPure, all you have to do is go to timelinenutrition.com/next level. timelinenutrition.com/next level. And let's get back to the show. And finally, we can talk about another research-oriented aspect, which is time-ordered eating. In other words, when you sit down to one particular meal, how are you ordering the food that you consume? Research has shown, interestingly enough, that if you consume fiber and protein and water foods first in your meals, you'll tend to be less hungry, have more satiation, and be less likely to consume the rest of the meal and eat more of foods or get seconds. Versus if you eat these highly palatable combinations of foods of fat, starch, sugar, salt, and alcohol first in the meal, you might end up eating more. Now, research has shown, one particular research study showed that by eating protein first in a meal, what ended up happening is people did not lose weight more than people who weren't doing this, but they did have better health markers and a more beneficial, flexible metabolism. In other words, insulin levels were lower, blood sugar excursions were less, and even though they didn't lose weight in this very short study, they did see very beneficial metabolic changes that would help us suspect that they would lose weight later on. And so from my perspective, when you're looking at food, you want to be looking at this from the perspective of, okay, how do I match my 4 P's to my food intake, taking into account these, 5 T's: total amount of food, type of food, timing of food, timeline of eating, and time-oriented eating. Total amount being calories, type being macronutrients and micronutrients, timing of food being when you're eating your meals. Are you having equal time with and without food? Timeline of eating being how frequently you are eating inside your schedule of when you're eating and not eating, and time-oriented, the order in which you're eating your foods. These 5 T's are where the research essentially is in terms of things that we should be paying attention to in our nutrition. Now, the final thing I'll say here is this aspect of lean. We want foods that are low in calories, enough taste, but not too much taste, appetite suppressing, and nutrient dense. And once again, when we look at the totality of the research for averages, you can see that these foods tend to be soups, salads, scrambled shakes, stir fries, smoothies, skillet meals, etc. All of these S's. And in particular, they tend to be heavier in protein, lean protein, fiber, and water-based foods than they are in combinations of fat, sugar, starch, salt, and alcohol. This is how you want to be looking at this. You want to be, when you think about the types of foods, you want to be eating lean foods. And when you're eating lean foods, low calorie, enough taste, but not too much taste, appetite suppressing, and nutrient dense, these lean foods are going to oftentimes take care of the totals for you. But you're still going to have to always go back and check, what are my caloric levels? You can't ignore any of these things. You especially can't ignore the first two T's, total amount of food and type of food, because they're so closely linked, and depending on your unique physiology, psychology, personal preferences, and practical circumstances, you may need to pay more or less attention to totals over type, or more or less attention to type over totals. And then you can begin to think about this idea of timing of food, timeline of food, and then time ordered eating as you go along, and understand that hopefully this helps you get square on the importance of things like time restricted eating, frequency of eating, order of eating at particular meals, and know that total amount of food and type of food are more important than these other three elements, but these other three elements can also matter as well. So, very short podcast today on nutrition. I hope that was helpful for you. I hope it helps you sort of understand how to look at food in general, and maybe give you some insight and perspective on why you might not be seeing the results that you want to see. You always have to make sure that you're taking into account your unique physiology, psychology, practical circumstances, and personal preferences, and realizing that there is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all approach. If you are overly biased and dogmatic about a way of eating, that may be the very thing that's keeping you from getting the results you want. You can check based on these 4 T's: total amount, type of food, timing of eating, timeline of eating, and the order in which you're eating these foods, to get a sense of how well you are doing. And also check this against how low calorie are the foods you're eating. Are they have enough flavor but not too much? Are they appetite suppressing? And are they nutrient dense? These so-called lean foods. Hopefully these 2 models of these 5 T's and this lean acronym help you understand a little bit more about what you're doing with your nutrition. Thanks for hanging out with me on the podcast today, everybody, and I will see you at the next one.
You have been listening to the Next Level Human podcast with Dr. Jade Teta. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure you subscribe and consider leaving a review. You make the biggest difference when you pass on your lessons and inspire others. That's why reviews like this are so powerful. Your words may be the only ones that resonate for someone else. Please remember, the information in this podcast is for educational purposes only. Always consult your personal physician or therapist before making any lifestyle changes. And finally, thank you for who you are in the world and the difference you make.